said, we are here for the fiscal year 2023 Students in the Care of DC Out of School Time Coordinating Entity Grant Information Session, and today is August 16th, 2022. I'm going to lead off the presentation, and Katrina is going to pick up at that point. My name is Deborah Eichenbaum. I'm a grants management specialist with the Office of Out of School Time Grants and Youth Outcomes. We go by the OST office because it's a lot easier to say. I'm gonna jump in. So the Office for Students in the Care of DC, also known as SCDC, is located within the Deputy Mayor for Education's office, also known as the DME. SCDC's mission is to ensure that every student who comes into contact with the child welfare, juvenile justice, and criminal justice system in the district receives high-quality educational and workforce development services and supports that meets their individual needs, builds on their strengths, empowers them to succeed, and creates opportunities for them to thrive. The district is committed to supporting students in preparing for a bright future. In service of that commitment, the district is seeking to support strong nonprofit organizations that provide students with high-quality program opportunities. Grant awards are contingent upon the availability of funds. The scope of the grant. This RFA competition invites high-performing, fiscally responsible nonprofits to apply. Organizations applying must demonstrate their experience managing and coordinating enrichment or youth programming, their experience managing subcontractors or their willingness to work with subcontractors, their ability to implement evidence-based practices that support youth development, and their experience working in a secure facility. This RFA is being offered in partnership with SCDC. The intent of this RFA is to select one coordinating entity that will manage a high-quality out-of-school time program and manage subcontractors to provide evidence-based educational, social, emotional, and physical health opportunities and activities for students experiencing incarceration. The vision of a coordinating entity is so that an organization can work with subcontractors to create the program they envision, but do not ever need to provide direct services. Organizations applying must serve youth through a positive youth development approach. Organizations applying must have experience working with justice system involved students, and the students in the care are typically between the ages of 12 to 20 years old. The program defined. For the purposes of this RFA, an OST program is defined as a structured, supervised learning or youth development opportunity offered to students. For the dosage required, the program must operate at least, that's minimum of, 2 hours per day, 3 days a week for a minimum of 34 weeks between October 2022 and September 2023. The program must also be available during school breaks and provide programming on weekends. The program must also provide each youth participant with access to a similar community-based program after release from the DC facility in order to provide the youth participant with a continuum of programming. That is a component of programming that is often overlooked but needs to be addressed by all applicants. Total amount of funding. Grant funds will be coming from a federal source, and grantees must be able to be compliant with federal requirements. The OST office anticipates awarding one grant up to $420,000 to coordinate the OST programs at the DC facilities. Applicants may request up to $420,000. The OST office maintains the right to adjust the number of grant awards and award amounts. Grant awards, as I said before, are contingent on the availability of funds. Youth development outcomes. Youth development is a process that prepares youth to meet the challenges of childhood, adolescence, and adulthood and achieve their full potential by offering activities and experiences that help youth develop social, emotional, physical, cognitive, and spiritual competencies. Positive youth development is a method that engages youth within their communities, schools, organizations, peer groups, and families in a manner that is both productive and constructive, recognizes, utilizes, and enhances youth's strengths, and promotes positive outcomes for youth by providing opportunities, fostering positive relationships, and offering supports to build on the youth's strengths and assets. Positive youth justice, or PYJ, applies positive in a juvenile justice setting and uses a strengths-based approach to serving youth. PYJ emphasizes personal accountability and skill development. To prepare youth to succeed, the applicant must be able to work with subcontractors that deliver programs with the principles of positive youth development and positive youth justice. Research shows that the best way to enhance long-term public safety is to provide court-involved youth with the tools they need to successfully transition into adulthood. So more on positive youth justice. Positive youth justice focuses on the following 6 developmental needs of juvenile justice involved youth. Work. This involves and includes work experience, apprenticeships, employment readiness, income, and independence. Education. This includes literacy, credentials, learning skills, and career planning. Health. This can be physical activity, diet and nutrition, mental and behavioral health, and lifestyle. Relationships. This usually focuses on communication skills, conflict resolution, family systems, intimacy, and support. Community. This involves civic engagement, community leadership, services, and responsibilities. And creativity. This is mostly personal expression, visual arts, performing arts, and language arts. Through the PYJ approach, fewer youth are being rearrested and fewer are being reconvicted. These precedent-setting year-to-year reductions are occurring while the agency is meeting its legal mandate to place youth in the least restrictive, most home-like environment consistent with public safety. The applicant must be able to coordinate the enrichment program with subcontractors that have the ability to deliver the program through both positive youth development and positive youth justice approaches. Evidence-based intervention. Since these funds come from a federal source, in order to receive the maximum grant award, applicants must have a history of using an evidence-based intervention. For example, high-impact tutoring or READ 180. that will support academic, social emotional learning, or another youth development outcome. Evidence-based practices are defined as practices or programming that have been shown through research or data to improve outcomes. The evidence-based intervention should meet the American Rescue Plan Act criteria and is defined as activities, strategies, or interventions. Ready for the next slide, Alex. That demonstrate a statistically significant effect on improving student outcomes or other relevant outcomes based on one of these following outcomes. Either strong evidence from at least one well-designed and well-implemented experimental study, or moderate evidence from at least one well-designed and well-implemented quasi-experimental study, or promising evidence from at least one well-designed and well-implemented correlational study with statistical controls for selection bias, or it can demonstrate a rationale based on high-quality research findings or positive evaluation that such activities, strategies, or interventions are likely to improve student outcomes or other relevant outcomes, and include ongoing efforts to examine the effects of such activities, strategies, or interventions. For additional information on evidence-based intervention, please see the U.S. Department of Education's guidance on using evidence to strengthen educational investments. If the applicant applies for the maximum award amount, a one-page citation or bibliography of the research that supports the evidence-based intervention they will be using must be submitted. The target population. One grant will be awarded to an organization that can serve students between the ages of 12 and 20. We know that the target population is highly variable and transient. The population fluctuates frequently, and the length of stays varies. The organization should be prepared to serve, but the service is not limited to youth charged as adults, also known as Title 16 youth, secure detained youth, youth awaiting placement, and female identifying youth. Applicants must be able to serve up to a maximum of 60 youth per day throughout the grant period, understanding the variable population as I just mentioned. The applicant must maintain a minimum adult to participant ratio of at least 1 to 15 at all times, unless a lower ratio is required by the district. So the grant and the program period. The grant period is October 1st, 2022 through September 30th, 2023. The program period is when school enrichment must take place is also in that same time period, October 1st, 2022 through September 30th, 2023. Specific weeks may be determined and requested by the OST office and SCDC. That would be discussed before a grant agreement is signed. Program dosage. For the purposes of this RFA, and I stated this earlier, OST program is defined as a structured, supervised learning or youth development opportunity offered to students that must operate for a minimum of 2 hours per day, 3 days per week for 34 weeks between October 2022 and September 2023. Preference will be given to programs that can include operation during school breaks and on weekends. In addition, the program must provide each youth with access to a similar community-based program after release from the designated DC facility in order to provide the youth participant with a continuum of programming. All staff supporting programs on site and in person will be required to follow all health protocols required by the DC Department of Health. I'm going to pause here and see if at this point there are any questions. Alex, did anything come up in the chat?
We currently do not have any questions in the chat, but as I say that, I do see somebody type it into the chat. So we might have a question coming soon. But if you do have a question, you can either come off mute or you can type it into the chat, whichever feels more comfortable for you. Who selects the sub-grantees for this program?
Sub-grantees are selected by the coordinating entity that is selected. Well, at this point then, I am going to turn this over to my colleague, Katrina Evans.
Katrina, before you go, can I just jump in and respond to this question? So Justice off my block asked if we will have access to this recorded video. Yes, so we will be posting the video on the Learn24 website, and it will be under the current funding opportunities that is listed there. So we'll be there. And then we do have another question as well, Deborah. But sorry, going back to where the recording video will be located. It will be located on the website learn24.dc.gov, and then there's a tab that says what's that tab say? Okay. So the tab it says service providers, and then under service providers it says funding opportunities, and from there you can access the website, the actual recording. And so Deborah, sorry Katrina, a couple more questions came in. So will the coordinated entity have to manage the process for selecting the grantees is the first question.
So what I'm going to do, since I think that there are going to be several questions and I just want to make sure we have enough time to get through the presentation, and also to make sure that the process is always fair, I'm going to take most of these questions and answer them in the questions and answers document, which will be uploaded to the website as well. And that way, everyone, not just the people who are on this, who are present at the grant information session, will have access to the answers. So please feel free to put any questions that you have in the chat. If they are general questions that we can answer right now, absolutely, we are happy to. And if they, and otherwise we will just answer them in due course in that questions and answers document.
Thanks, Deborah. And with that being said, I'll continue on with the eligibility and requirements. Okay, so organizations should have a history of managing federal funds. As the applicant is a prior Learn24 grantee, the applicant must be compliant with all prior grant agreements. Organizations must have a 501c3 nonprofit status as determined by the IRS for a minimum of 2 years at the time of submission. Applicants must submit a 501(c)(3) designation letter from the IRS. Organizations must be incorporated and registered to operate in the district and provide we have 3 things, which is the basic business license, the certificate of good standing, and a clean hands certificate. Please verify that all documentation is within the timeframes provided. If not, the organization may be ineligible to apply. So like, for example, if there's a clean hands and the good standing documents should be dated within the last year. So no August 2020 first or later, which means anytime between sometime at the end of August 2021 and August 29 of this year. So, and the basic business license should be currently valid. Okay, next slide. For the program it focus and experience. So organization's primary vision and primary focus must be on serving DC youth with intentional opportunities that help the said youth reach desired developmental outcomes and have a meaningful role in their community. Organizations must clearly define how these outcomes will be measured. Also, organizations must have shown success managing youth programs for youth involved in the juvenile justice system. The district is currently seeking a coordinating entity that will subcontract with DC community-led organizations to provide a rich variety of experiences for DC youth. Okay, so the next slide will be on financial requirements. Organizations must provide evidence of managing federal funds or demonstrate the ability to manage federal funds. The applicant must include copies of these in their application, the 2 years of the most recent balance and income statement, 2 years of the most recent IRS Form 990 series, and any schedules filed. A board-approved organization budget, a program budget, and 1 year of the most recent audit reports conducted by an independent CPA and completed within the last 12 months. Grantees must have financial protocols financial management protocols to comply with all federal regulations. Grantees must also have cash management procedures and written allowability procedures. So there are some grant fund limitations. I'll now go over some of them. The grant funds may only be used to support youth in the care of DC. A minimum of 40% of the grant amount must be used for subcontractors to provide services directly to youth to provide a robust enrichment program. A list of potential subcontractors can be provided to the grantee if needed. So we will give you a list if you do need that. Grant funds may not be used with other DC grants to serve the same students in the same program at the same locations. Another limit, there are also requirements for purchase of equipment and computing devices per federal regulations. If the applicant plans to do so, please describe the specific purchase and the need for the equipment and or computing services. There's also some limits for in the RFA that I just want to go over, such as the sales tax. All of our grantees are nonprofit and they have a exemption from paying sales tax. So because of that, the OST office will not reimburse sales tax if it's on a receipt. So if we see it on a receipt, we will just subtract it, and but just make sure that we will not do sales tax. Next slide. And for the program expenses, according to the Nonprofit Fair Compensation Act of 2020, DC law allows any grantee to apply a negotiated indirect cost agreement, which is also known as the NICRA. And you could use that if you have that, but if there's no NICRA in place, the indirect rate is at 10%. So also we do, as our office, we do provide a budget template. If you need one, it will be on our website, in the Learn 24 website. It is optional. You do not need to use this. It is as a resource on our Learn24 site if you need a template to track any budget and program expenses. So with this, I'll just, if there's any questions before I move on to the application part, I know we are limited on time, so if there's any specific questions like Deborah mentioned, we'll take those and write those down and have it posted to the Q&A that will be published on our website. So with that, I will move on to the application section of this presentation. So the application process. So applications and attachments must be submitted by the due date and time, which is Monday, August 29th, 2022 at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Successfully submitted applications will receive a confirmation notice via the browser upon completion. We suggest that applicants print this confirmation as evidence and proof of submission. You could do that by you print it out when you see it, or you can take a screenshot, use the screenshot capture key on your computing device, or you can even just use your cell phone and just take a picture. So those are the ways you could do that. And applications without a confirmation or without any evidence of submission that are late or incomplete will not be reviewed. So continuing on to the application submissions. Also applications with missing any attachments that are required will be considered incomplete and will not be reviewed. Applications that if an applicant does not submit all the required documents as outlined in the RFA will not be reviewed. Any additional documents that are, that were not required in the RFA will not be reviewed, and we will remove those from your application. And also the documents that exceed the page limit as per the grant, the RFA will not be reviewed. So we also, as you see on the application, we do provide a checklist. We do this to make it easier to make sure that you can just check it off, so you can be consistent. And but do not submit it or upload it. It must be uploaded in the Seamless Docs. Just use a checklist to prepare and your answers. And remember just to read the RFA very carefully. Make sure everything that you are submitting is as described in the RFA. And just make sure, again, it's a page limit. So that's for the application. The next thing is a narrative. I will go over the narrative. The narrative format, responses should be written according to the sections and in the order listed to receive the maximum allocation of points. We suggest that you organize the narrative by the sections with the corresponding header, so it'll be easier for the reviewer to review it. In the budget narrative will be included in the overall pages, and it should be used to justify the budget calculations. But the actual budget that you're going to use will be a separate documentation. So a tip that we usually like to use for when you write your narrative, put yourself in the reviewer's shoes to know how, like, if you were a reviewer, to see how it would exactly sound to you. And another thing that we are always looking for reviewers. So if you would like to review for us, you can go to our website and you can click on, we are always looking for reviewers. So if you want some, experience on that, you can always sign up with us. You cannot, of course, review within a competition that you are applying for, but you can do other competitions. So we do strongly encourage anybody interested in being a grant reviewer to please consider that. Okay, and the next, the format, it's we have a few stuff that we like the format to be. It must be actually a format as follows 1-inch margins. Please use 1-inch margins. We suggest the acquired font is a Times New Roman with 11 point. And you could kind of put this figures and captions if a size 8, but the others, please use a 11 point font. Number each page consecutively. So just make it consecutively. Use single spacing, no double spacing. You can insert tables, graphs, and charts, and they do count towards the limit. So you could feel free to use those. And remember, it's a 10-page maximum. anything over 10 pages will not be considered. So please consider and follow these instructions, and they are required. And for I'm on to the next slide would be about the budget. Please provide a program budget. Remember, the calculations do not count towards the page limits, but include, like in the budget narrative, the justifications for all budget items in the budget narrative. Fully describe the use of the grant dollars in the budget narrative, which is going to be part of the overall narrative, which will be in that 10 page maximum. So just make sure you provide the number, like we do like as much detail as possible. So please provide much detail that we could, so we know what, or the reviewer know what it's being used for. But the actual, but just to clarify again, the actual budget which should be on a template, and you can use again the template that we do have on our website. It's going to be on a separate documentation that was not counted towards the actual narrative. So the next section will be important dates. Please take note of these dates. Some of them have already passed, but as we see, we're already on the 16th, which is right now the grant information session. And keep in mind that as you see, there's going to be the last day to submit questions for Q&A, which is to be Tuesday of next week. And then on the next Thursday, Thursday on the following week, we will answer, those questions will be published. So, and please be mindful of the application deadline, which is Monday, August 29th at 5 p.m. And we will be announcing the awards will be announced in October of 2022 via email. And as mentioned before, we do have a questions and answers. You can submit them. If you have any questions about the RFA, please submit it to the email on the screen. Please put that the subject line that has SCDC coordinating entity RFA in the subject line, so we know what it's about. We have already started. This publication process has already started. I don't know if we have any questions yet, but please feel free to submit that. Again, as Deborah mentioned, we have collected some along right now in the presentation. So those once and when we do receive other ones to the email, within 36 hours of receipt, they will be responses to them, and that's excluding weekends. So you can look at the questions and answers on the learn24@dc.gov. Any questions asked after the August 23rd will not be answered. And that completes this part, and I will pass it on unless there's any questions that are basic, but I will pass it to Deborah for the review process.
Thank you so much, Katrina. I'm just going to, since I think we do have a good amount of time, I'm going to just briefly respond to some of the questions that are in the chat. And as I said, they will also be put in the questions and answers document. But I see that someone asked for whether 60 youth a day is to be broken into groups of 15. That would be up to the provider. And as long as there is the ratio of 1 to 15 and not more than that, you could not have 1 adult to 60 youth. Yes, all of the services will be provided inside a secure facility. And we have the link taken care of. Thank you so much, Lashunda. And then the question on flexibility on insurance requirements. So the OST office is not the monitor of the insurance requirements. That is done through the Office of Risk Management, and the Office of Risk Management would be the ones to decide whether any of the insurance requirements can be modified. It is sometimes that they do modify things like auto insurance has happened in the past. If, for example, you never drive to work or you only take public transportation. Usually the umbrella policy is not something that they have typically been able to modify at all. That is usually something that they expect in full. However, I see the question is also about whether the sub-grantees will need insurance, and yes, they would also need insurance, and the same levels of insurance. And questions asked today should be posted by Thursday. Okay, so I am now going to move on to the review process. About the scoring rubric. The rubric is attached to the RFA. It is in the back of the RFA. Please review the rubric and remember that the reviewers use the same rubric to score the narrative. There are 4 sections in each row. If it is unacceptable or the applicant did not respond, they would get 1 point. If the answer is acceptable, it's 2 points. If the answer is good, it's 3 points. Excellent, 4 points. Each row is scored from that 1 to 4 points. Checkboxes are listed under each description, and reviewers are told that if they cannot check all of the boxes in one section, then they cannot give that score. So an applicant would only get the score that all of the boxes in that section can be checked for. Applicants will receive completed and anonymous score sheets. Scoring. There are 4 sections to be reviewed, and it's on a 96-point scale. Organizational history, capacity, and relevance experience is 16 points. Subcontractors, 24 points. Details about the program, 40 points, and the budget, 16 points. So while all sections are important, it's clear that the details regarding the program is especially important. So reviewers, each proposal will be reviewed by 3 reviewers using the scoring rubric and a final meeting. The OST office will recruit and accept reviewers who have a background and knowledge of youth development and out-of-school time programming. All reviewers are screened for conflict of interest, and each reviewer will receive training on how to use a scoring rubric. The top 2 or 3 ranking applicants will be invited for an interview. The interview panel may include representatives from the DME, which includes the OST office, SCDC, students, and families. The reviewer score and the interview score will be used to generate a final score. Priority points may be awarded to applicants that offer programming during weekend and school breaks, and the district will make final award decisions based on the final score. The district may provide additional preferences and priorities in order to make final award decisions. So notification of awards. All applicants will be notified via email about the status of the award by October 2022, if not before. Applicants will receive reviewer score sheets in November 2022. There is an error in the RFA where it states that the score sheets will be available in November 2021. That would be very difficult. And it should say November 2022. Applicants should ensure that the email address that was stated before, rfa.sy22-23 is on the list of acceptable email addresses to ensure receipt of emails sent by us related to this grant competition. So I honestly cannot say it enough times. Please make sure that email address is on the acceptable list of emails, because if we have any questions or we need any documentation, we will email you. If we do not receive a response back because the email went to your junk mail, then the applicant may be ineligible for review. Grantee requirements. Some of the OST, since the OST office, is accountable to the taxpayers, we do have very strict compliance measures. We also work very closely with our grantees to make sure they are able to comply and try to ease that burden whenever possible. We believe in an open door policy and are happy to speak or answer questions at any time. We actually pride ourselves on being responsive and available. Grantees are required to complete grant agreements with Learn24 and submit all required documents by November 2022. Failure to submit required documents and all required insurance documentation within 45 days of the grant award may result in immediate termination of the grant award. And grantees must designate at least one individual as the primary contact and implementer of the program. So I'll briefly read through what many of the grant requirements are. If an applicant is awarded and becomes a grantee, you would need to attend grantee meetings and activities, participate in research and evaluation activities, comply with the insurance requirements, participate in administrative and programmatic site visits, and provide required documentation, ensure that all staff acquire the required clearances, that includes subcontractors, utilize the district's database, CitySpan, provide programmatic updates and reports, provide financial documentation as required, and report all incidents as mandated. Confidentiality. The information will be shared, and that the grantee shall hold all such confidential information in the strictest confidence as a fiduciary, and shall not voluntarily sell, transfer, publish, disclose, display, or otherwise make available to any third person such confidential information or any portion thereof without the express written consent of the other party. DC mandates the confidentiality of juvenile records and the confidentiality of any and all information pertaining to juveniles associated with the Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services. Training and certification. Grantee must provide the organization's bullying prevention policy, and that is the bullying policy that is enforced on its properties, functions during transportation, and in electronic communication. The Youth Bullying Prevention Act provides information with respect to bullying prevention policies, codes of conduct, bullying investigations and appeals, and the role of the Office of Human Rights, the role of the Office of Human Rights compliance procedures, and related matters. Grantees may contact the Office of Human Rights for template language and assistance drafting a bullying prevention policy if you do not have one. At least one person per site must have CPR or cardiopulmonary resuscitation and first aid training. The certification of completion must be uploaded into the CitySpan database. All staff must be aware of the location of the trained CPR personnel on site, but the trained the person trained in CPR does not need to be on staff with the organization. It can be someone who is on this, on the site, but not associated with the program. Excuse me. Any other required trainings or and facility requirements must be completed. So application tips. Please make sure that the application follows the order in the RFA. As Katrina said before, do not submit documents or materials that are not requested since they will not be reviewed. The budget narrative should be detailed and based on each line item in the budget and included in the application narrative. The actual budget itself can be a separate document. Avoid general language. Be detailed and specific, especially when you're talking about the program activities and schedule, how you've used evaluation to improve your program, describe your use of subcontractors, and describe how you're tapping other revenue streams for your program. What I always suggest is that you try and do one of the most difficult things of all, and that's write the application early. If you can write the application early, you can give it to someone to read, and you give it to that person along with the rubric. Make sure that that person understands what that youth is going to experience when in your program. You can have anyone, whether it's friend or board member or anyone else, read the application and score it, but ask them to be actually tough when they're scoring. They are not doing you any favors if they read it and say, wow, that was such a great job. I loved everything. It is very important to read the RFA carefully, not just the questions that are asked in the narrative. We suggest that you use the rubric when responding to the questions asked, since that's exactly what reviewers use when scoring the narrative that you are submitting. And that brings us to the end of our presentation. Again, there is that very important email address. It has happened in the past, which is why I harp on it, that things have gotten stuck in someone's junk mail and their application has then not been reviewed because they did not respond to the email sent from the OST office in a timely manner. So please, please, please make sure that that email is on your list of accepted email addresses. And anything else? Alex?
Yeah, we just got one quick question in the chat. Has this grant been done before? Or is this a new grant opportunity?
This grant has not been awarded before, so this will be a new grant opportunity.
Other than that, we do not have any additional questions at the moment. We do have 5 minutes.
So that might mean that I give everybody back 5 minutes in their day. We will wait right here. If you have any other questions, please feel free. As Alex said earlier, you can come off mute or put it in the chat box, whatever you'd like. And I see this next one just popped up. So that is an excellent question. Most of our grants, this is federal funding, and I don't know how many years the federal funding is available for. So most OST grants have an opportunity for a 3-year of continuation. But I do not know. But I see Linda might have an answer for that. But again, that will definitely be answered as well in the questions and answers document. And anyone can feel free to email us at that same email address. Just put in SCDC, coordinating entity RFA, and ask any questions, and they will be responded to in that Q&A document.
I was just gonna add, I'm having some Teams issues, but in response to the question about the multi-year funding, so for this particular RFA, it's for one-time funding, but the funding is available for an additional year, so up to 2 years. So it's 2 years through FY.
Great, so there's
I've
a
been having some Teams
continuation.
issues, so I don't know if you could hear me or not.
I s-
Sorry.
So it sounds like there is an opportunity for a continuation of up to 1 year. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Great. Thank you, Lushanda. All right.
There are no additional questions. We will give you guys back 3 minutes of your time. Thank you again for joining us today for the Learn 24 SCDC Coordinating Entity Grant Information Session. Please feel free to send us any questions or concerns to that email. So thank you and have a nice day.
Thank you all.
Thank you for joining us, Lushanda.